One freezing moment inside Windsor Castle reportedly changed the future of the British monarchy forever. No loud scandal, no leaked phone call, no public fight, just 3 minutes of silence. According to this story, King Charles was standing before senior military figures and Commonwealth officials during a private investiture ceremony when suddenly everything stopped. His words disappeared. His body froze. His gaze became distant. And for 3 full minutes, the room watched the monarch of the United Kingdom stand silent, unable to continue, while nobody around him knew whether they were legally allowed to step forward. That was the terrifying part. The problem was not only that the king seemed physically overwhelmed. The real shock was that the ancient system around him had no clear answer for what should happen next. Palace aides stood frozen. Guards did not move. The official whose job was to assist the king could not act because the rules had never clearly explained what to do if a monarch became temporarily unable to continue while still conscious. And in that dangerous silence, Prince William did what protocol would never have allowed. He crossed the room. He placed his hand gently on his father's arm, and he guided the king to a chair. Before the room could fall into panic, Catherine stepped forward beside William. Calm, controlled, and composed, they continued the ceremony as if the crown itself had quietly passed through their hands for just a few minutes. No announcement, no drama, no official transfer of power. But everyone in that room reportedly understood what they had witnessed. The future king and queen had just protected the monarchy in real time. Before we go deeper into this shocking royal story, please take 1 second to subscribe to the channel. We bring you dramatic royal stories, emotional palace moments, and the hidden decisions behind the headlines. Now, let's uncover how one 3-minute incident allegedly forced King Charles to change the future of the crown forever. According to the narrative, Charles recovered later that evening, but the damage had already been done. Not physical damage, institutional damage. The incident exposed a weakness nobody inside the monarchy wanted to admit. For centuries, the system had been built on tradition, ceremony, and the assumption that the monarch would either be capable of acting or completely unable to act. But real life is not that simple. Illness, exhaustion, stress, and age can create a dangerous gray area, and Windsor Castle reportedly exposed that gray area in front of everyone. A king can be alive. A king can be conscious. But what happens if he cannot speak, cannot continue, and cannot direct the ceremony? That was the question nobody had properly answered. According to this story, that night became the turning point. Charles reportedly began secret late-night consultations with constitutional experts, palace advisors, and senior legal minds. This was not about pride. It was not about panic. It was about survival. The king had seen with his own eyes that the monarchy was depending too much on tradition and not enough on a clear modern structure. So he moved quietly, and what came next reportedly changed the balance of royal power. The new framework, described in the story as a major succession and throne maintenance reform, was not presented as an abdication. Charles was not giving up the throne. William was not taking the crown early. But the law allegedly gave William and Catherine a level of authority no heir and future queen had ever held in quite the same way. For the first time, according to the narrative, the future of the monarchy was no longer waiting in the background. It was being legally prepared in the present. The biggest change reportedly involved the red boxes, the highly sensitive government papers traditionally handled by the reigning monarch. For generations, those documents symbolized direct access to the machinery of state. They carried briefings, intelligence, cabinet information, and matters too serious for public view. In the old system, the monarch held that access almost alone. But after the Windsor incident, that model no longer felt safe. According to the story, William and Catherine were granted concurrent access to major weekly briefings, allowing them to understand state matters in real time rather than waiting for a future crisis. That detail matters, because succession is not only about wearing a crown. It is about knowledge. It is about readiness. It is about being able to act without confusion when the nation needs stability. Charles reportedly understood something painful but necessary. If the monarchy was to survive the next crisis, William could not be treated like a student waiting outside the classroom. He had to be inside the room.
But the most surprising part of the story was not William or share kare. But the most surprising part of the story was not William. It was Catherine. According to the narrative, Catherine's name appeared again and again in the new framework, but as a central figure in the monarchy's future survival. This was the part that reportedly shocked old palace circles the most. For generations, royal wives were expected to support, smile, appear, and endure. They were important, but often informally important. Their influence existed behind closed doors, not always in written authority. This story claims Charles changed that. Catherine was allegedly recognized as a senior constitutional advisor in the long-term preparation of the monarchy, especially when it came to Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. In simple words, she was no longer just standing beside William. She was being written into the future, and that changed everything. Because Catherine's strength has never been loud. She does not dominate rooms. She does not create unnecessary drama. But her power comes from calmness, public trust, emotional intelligence, and the ability to steady William when royal pressure becomes too heavy. Charles reportedly saw that clearly. After Windsor, he understood that the future monarchy could not be built on William alone. It needed the partnership that had already proven itself in the most dangerous moment. But inside the palace, not everyone welcomed this shift. According to the story, content mein badle aur share kare. To the story, Queen Camilla saw the danger immediately. From her perspective, the personal and institutional at the same time. She had spent decades fighting for acceptance. Her place beside Charles had not come easily. Public opinion had once been brutal. The road from scandal to queen consort had taken years of careful rebuilding. And now, suddenly, William and Catherine were being handed formal power while Charles was still alive. Camilla reportedly feared one thing above all, that the center of gravity was moving away from her. The confrontation allegedly happened in a private Buckingham Palace room, with Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine facing the draft of the new framework. No advisors were there to soften the words. No staff were allowed to manage the mood. For once, the four central figures had to face the future directly. Camilla reportedly questioned whether this was truly about continuity, or whether it was a quiet transfer of power wrapped in polite language. And in a way, her fear was understandable. Because once William and Catherine gained formal authority, the palace would never feel the same again. The future would no longer be waiting politely behind the present. It would be standing inside the present, legally recognized and operational. According to the narrative, Charles responded with unusual firmness. That was the moment William reportedly saw something painful and powerful. His father was choosing the monarchy's future over domestic peace. The consequences came quickly. According to the story, the next morning, Camilla entered her private office of official papers that symbolized her closeness to the king's work. But the system had changed. Sensitive briefings and major documents had reportedly been rerouted toward William's expanded office. The message was quiet, but brutal. The palace machinery was moving toward the future, and Camilla could feel it. The painful part was that it was not framed as punishment. It was procedure. That almost made it worse. To us, if someone is punished, they can argue, they can defend themselves. But when a system changes and simply moves past you, there is almost nothing to fight. According to the story, Camilla was not being attacked. She was being structurally reduced. And that made the shift feel permanent. William, however, was not celebrating. According to the narrative, he struggled deeply with the new authority. He knew how it could look. He feared people might think he was eager for the crown, impatient for his father's reign to end, or quietly taking control while Charles remained king. That was not what he wanted. William had lived his entire life under the shadow of duty, but accepting real power while his father was still alive carried emotional weight. It was Catherine who reportedly helped him understand the truth. Refusing responsibility out of guilt would not protect Charles. It would endanger the system Charles was trying to save. That was Catherine's strength in this story. She did not push William toward ambition. She pushed him toward duty. She reminded him that this was not about taking power from his father. It was about honoring the sacrifice his father was making by making sure the monarchy would not freeze again in a moment of crisis.
Excitement, with burden, and Catherine's own burden became heavier too. Because according to the story, hidden inside the new framework was a section that affected Prince George. The young prince's future was no longer something Catherine could shield for much longer. The documents reportedly required him to begin structured constitutional preparation earlier than she had hoped. Legal, education, statecraft, royal history, the responsibilities of a future king. For Catherine, that part cut deeply. She had spent years trying to give George, Charlotte, and Louis as normal a childhood as possible. She wanted them grounded, protected, loved before they were consumed by duty. But with one signature, the crown stepped closer to her children. George was no longer simply a boy growing up inside a royal family. He was being formally prepared for the throne. And Catherine had to accept that the monarchy she was helping protect would also claim part of her son's childhood. That is what made this story more than politics. It was family. Charles was facing mortality. William was facing power. Catherine was facing the loss of privacy around her children. Camilla was facing the fear of becoming less central. And the entire monarchy was being reshaped because of 3 minutes of silence at Windsor Castle. According to the narrative, the final emotional turning point came in a private conversation between Charles and William. Away from cameras, advisors, and constitutional language, they stood not as king and heir, but as father and son. Charles reportedly admitted that signing the framework felt like writing the opening sentence of his own departure. That line carried the full weight of the moment. For a reigning monarch, preparing the future can feel like acknowledging the end. And for Charles, who had waited decades to become king, that could not have been easy. William reportedly answered with honesty. He told his father he did not want power if accepting it made Charles feel erased from his own reign. That was the emotional heart of the story, because this was not a son trying to replace his father. It was a son afraid of hurting him. Charles then reportedly explained the truth every monarch must eventually face. A sovereign can protect his own position for as long as possible, or he can protect the institution that must survive after him. According to the story, Charles chose the second path. Not surrender. Preparation, not weakness. Foresight. Then Charles asked William for one promise. Catherine must never be reduced to a ceremonial figure. She must never be isolated by palace politics. She must never become trapped inside a cold court that uses her image but ignores her voice. Charles reportedly understood that Catherine's warmth and emotional discipline were essential to the future monarchy. William promised that Catherine would not stand beside him as decoration. She would stand beside him as duty. That promise reportedly sealed the new partnership. When the public later saw Charles, William, and Catherine standing together, the image carried more meaning than a normal royal appearance. Charles had not abdicated. William had not seized power. Catherine had not been elevated out of ambition. The three of them were presenting a new kind of monarchy, one built not only on inheritance, but on preparation. Do you think King Charles made the right decision by giving William and Catherine more authority now? Or do you think this move creates even more tension inside the palace? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more dramatic royal stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next update.